had survived some of the world's most dangerous war zones, missions in Mosul, Kandahar, and Fallujah, where every breath could have been her last, where she trained soldiers not just to fight, but to come back alive. She had worn body armor through sandstorms and navigated helicopters under fire. She had been the one who stayed calm when others broke. But nothing, not even decades of military service, prepared General Monica Elaine Triggs for what happened at her own son's funeral on American soil. That morning in Arlington was gray, but not soft or gentle. It was a heavy kind of gray, the kind that made the air thick and pressed down on your chest, the kind of sky that seemed like it was grieving with you. Monica had attended too many military funerals before. She knew the rituals, the folding of the flag, the trumpet's last note, the gun salute that echoed like ghosts in the air. But this time, it wasn't for a fellow soldier under her command. It was for her son, Staff Sergeant Isaiah Triggs, 29 years old, gone in an instant when a roadside explosive hit his convoy during a standard patrol in Kandahar, and Monica wore her full dress uniform. Not because anyone told her to, but because Isaiah had once joked, "If I ever go down, I want my mom to look like a damn general when she says goodbye." So she honored his words. 4 stars on her shoulders, medals across her chest like milestones of sacrifice. Her hat was perfect, her posture sharp. On the outside, she looked unbreakable. On the inside, she was holding on by threads. She sat in the back of a long black SUV, her hands trembling slightly as they held a funeral program with Isaiah's face smiling up at her. He looked so young in that picture, smiling in uniform like he had his whole future ahead of him. To her right sat her sister, Vivian, silent and supportive. On her left, Isaiah's godfather, Command Sergeant Major Delroy Hunt, a man who had stood beside Monica through firefights and deployments. His presence that day was less about military tradition and more about holding each other up when words stopped working. As they approached Section 60, where the most recently fallen are laid to rest, Monica could already hear the low hum of the military band preparing. Soldiers lined the path in ceremonial stillness, their rifles pointed down, their faces unreadable. It was the kind of orchestrated sorrow only the military could execute, flawless, reverent, and crushing. Monica took a deep breath. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. Her voice didn't shake. It wasn't panic, just exhaustion. Soul-deep exhaustion. Delroy reached over, gently touched her hand. "You've been through worse," he said. "But this ain't how it's supposed to be." The SUV stopped. A soldier opened her door. She stepped out. Her heels echoed against the concrete like punctuation marks in a moment that didn't need words. Heads turned. People in uniform saluted. Some civilians placed their hands over their hearts. Others whispered her name under their breath. Monica Triggs, the first black woman to ever earn 4 stars in the U.S. Army. A living legend. But today, she wasn't a headline. She was a mother walking into grief. And that's when she saw him. A lone police officer pacing near the cars. His patrol vehicle was parked crooked on the curb, engine still running. Despite the cloud cover, he wore mirrored sunglasses, and his hand rested too comfortably near his holster. Something in her gut shifted. The officer, later identified as Brent Delaney, wasn't part of the official security detail. He'd been assigned by the city to help with traffic, unaware of who would be present that day. He turned, spotted Monica. His expression sharpened. "Ma'am!" he barked, already striding toward her. "Let me see some ID!" Monica froze mid-step, confused. She glanced around, thinking he must be speaking to someone else. "I'm talking to you!" Delaney repeated, louder now. His hand moved fully onto the grip of his weapon. Calmly, Monica responded. "I'm General Monica Triggs," she said, her voice clear. She slowly reached for her coat pocket. "I'm here to attend the funeral of my son. He's being buried right over there." "Stop right there!" the officer shouted, suddenly pulling his weapon. The sound of the holster click cut through the quiet like a siren. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A young child began to cry. Monica didn't flinch. Her hands lifted slowly. "I'm unarmed," she said, still level, still professional. "You're looking at a U.S. Army general. This is a dress uniform. I'm not a threat." But Delaney didn't back down, didn't lower the weapon. His aim didn't waver. He stood there, on sacred ground, at a funeral, with his weapon pointed directly at her chest. And then he said the unthinkable. "Get on the ground, now." Everything stopped. Monica didn't blink, didn't obey, didn't even tremble. But inside, her brain was screaming. She had spent 30 years teaching soldiers how to survive moments like this. But she had never imagined that one day she would be the target by a fellow American at her son's funeral on home soil. "I am a United States Army general," she said, louder now, her voice rising not in panic, but in controlled disbelief. "You are pointing a weapon at a grieving mother on the worst day of her life. I don't care what kind of costume you're wearing," Officer Delaney snapped, his voice sharp like broken glass. "I said get on the ground before I drop you." Those words sliced through the funeral like a blade. Some people gasped, others froze, but one man stepped forward without hesitation. Command Sergeant Major Delroy Hunt, Isaiah's godfather, a man who had been through war alongside General Triggs. "Sir, that's General Monica Triggs," Delroy said, voice firm, controlled but deadly serious. "You are seconds away from making the worst mistake of your life. Put the weapon down." Delaney's eyes darted, and in a blink, he swung the weapon from Monica toward Delroy. "Back off!" he shouted, finger trembling on the trigger. A few soldiers from the honor guard twitched. One even shifted forward. But a senior officer nearby raised a hand, signaling them to hold. No one wanted to trigger a catastrophe, but the tension was suffocating. The gun wasn't just drawn, it was steady, and Officer Delaney looked absolutely prepared to use it. Behind Monica, her sister Vivian's voice broke in a whisper. "This can't be happening." Her eyes filled with tears. "Monica, please, don't move." Monica didn't. She stood like a pillar, hands still raised in surrender, eyes locked on the man with the weapon. Her heart was pounding hard enough to make her vision blur, but her voice remained steady. "Officer," she said gently, "I'm going to reach into my coat pocket, slowly, and take out my military ID." "You reach," he said coldly. "I shoot." That's when the crowd began shifting. Quiet murmurs rippled. Parents pulled children behind them. Mourners whispered to one another. Two women in uniform, both of whom had served under Monica, were already recording everything on their phones. A soldier from the honor guard leaned into his shoulder radio and made the call. "Immediate supervisor needed at Section 60. Armed officer threatening a civilian, possibly racial profiling, situation escalating, urgent." But help hadn't arrived yet, and Delaney wasn't backing down. "Turn around," he growled. "On your knees, hands on your head." Monica stood still for a breath. Then another. She had faced live gunfire in hostile territory. She had buried friends, brothers in arms. And now, she had to bury her son. But this was the moment that almost broke her. She exhaled slowly. And then, with deliberate, silent dignity, General Monica Triggs lowered herself to the ground. Not out of fear, not because she felt guilt, but because she knew that if anyone else got hurt, Isaiah's funeral would turn into something far worse. From the crowd, a voice cracked through the silence. "What the hell is wrong with you? That's General Triggs." It came from a veteran in a wheelchair, his face red with rage. But Delaney didn't react. His eyes were locked, tunnel vision. His lip curled in anger. His grip didn't shake. "Somebody tackle him!" a woman yelled nearby. But Monica, even on her knees, lifted one hand ever so slightly. She didn't want this to become a shootout. Not here. Not today. And that's when someone came running. Lieutenant Serena Keogh, a junior officer who had been managing traffic at the front gate, had seen the chaos from a distance, and she was sprinting toward it, full speed. From 40 yards away, she shouted, "Delaney, holster your weapon, now!" He didn't respond. His stance didn't change. "I said holster it," Keogh screamed. "That is General Monica Triggs." She was nearly in his face now. Still, he didn't move, so she acted. Keogh lunged, slamming her palms upward into his arm with full force. The weapon flew out of his grip and clattered across the pavement. Delaney staggered back in shock, eyes wide, confused. When he instinctively reached to recover his weapon, Keogh didn't hesitate. She grabbed his wrist, twisted it behind his back, and forced him down. "You're done," she growled. "You're done." Two nearby officers rushed in to restrain him. Delaney was finally dragged to the side, shouting in confusion, humiliated but no longer a threat, and Monica was still kneeling, hands on her head. That's when Sergeant Diane Knowles, who had once served under Monica during a deployment in Romani, pushed through the crowd and knelt beside her. "Ma'am, it's okay now. We've got you," she said softly, voice trembling with emotion. Monica rose slowly. Her knees felt like stone, her back stiff, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from everything that had just been stolen from her. She looked around, faces frozen in shock, children clinging to parents, veterans biting their lips, fists clenched, and just ahead, the flag-draped casket of her son, still waiting to be lowered, his final goodbye shattered. But if she thought the worst was behind her, she was wrong. Because cameras had been rolling, phones had been recording, and by the time Monica stood upright again, the footage of a police officer drawing his gun on General Triggs was already going viral. The funeral had been scheduled to begin at exactly 10 a.m. By 10:06, the gates of Arlington Cemetery were swarmed, not just by soldiers and mourners, but by law enforcement, press vans, and journalists elbowing through barriers. The world had just witnessed what happened, but to those standing in the crowd, this wasn't news. This was a mother, a leader, a woman who gave her life to her country, nearly gunned down while mourning her son. And for many of them, this wasn't just injustice. This was America exposed. Black, white, Latino, Asian. Military families of every background had gathered that morning to honor a fallen soldier. But by the time the funeral paused, no, shattered, they were no longer just mourners. They were witnesses to something none of them could unsee, a decorated general, a grieving mother, forced to kneel on the cold ground, in full uniform, with a loaded weapon aimed at her face. The image stuck in their minds like a scar. Monica was quietly helped into a temporary tent for privacy, her movements stiff, mechanical. Her hands shook as she reached for her hat, but couldn't bring herself to remove it. Her body was still in survival mode. Her mind was still locked in that moment, and Delroy stood beside her, silent, his jaw tight. A man who'd faced war without blinking, now looked like he couldn't breathe. Outside the tent, Sergeant Diane Knowles was in a heated argument with two Arlington Police Department officers. "He shouldn't have even been out there alone," she said, her voice sharp, cracking from both fury and disbelief. He had no idea who he was dealing with. One officer raised his hands in defense. He wasn't part of the inner perimeter, just overflow traffic support. "Well, your overflow traffic just threatened to shoot a grieving mother at her son's funeral," Knowles snapped back. "You think that excuse is going to hold up when this hits national television?" Just a few feet away, Officer Brent Delaney sat in the back of a squad car, handcuffed but unreadable. His expression wasn't regret. It wasn't fear. It was blank, detached, and what he muttered to himself again and again sent chills down the spine of those within earshot. She wasn't acting right. She didn't look like she belonged. Not once did he ask if she was okay. Not once did he ask if her son had really died. He didn't even seem to grasp the weight of what he'd done. Back in the tent, Monica finally broke her silence. "He saw my skin before he saw my stars," she whispered. Delroy dropped his gaze. Words failed him. "I survived war zones," she said, barely louder than breath. "I've walked through sandstorms, led teams into burning villages. I've been shot at by enemies overseas. But the only time I've had a gun in my face, on American soil, was at my own son's funeral, from a cop." Her sister Vivian reached for her hand. "He didn't break you, Monica." But Monica shook her head slowly. "Number, he didn't have to. He broke this day. This was supposed to be Isaiah's, and now it'll always be about him." Outside the tent, mourners were beginning to gather again. A young woman named Brandy, who had served with Isaiah in Germany, was already live on social media. Her phone trembled as she held it up, but her voice was strong. "This is what we deal with. You could be a general, a mother, wearing full uniform at your own son's funeral, and they'll still see you as a threat, like you don't belong. I watched that officer pull a gun on someone I would have taken orders from without hesitation. She wasn't dangerous. She was grieving." The stream went viral in minutes. Within the hour, it hit 2.3 million views. By lunchtime, every major national outlet had reached out to the Department of Defense, the Arlington Police Department, and Monica's team, demanding statements. But Monica wasn't ready to speak. Not yet. The funeral resumed nearly 2 hours late. No speeches, no rifle salute, no taps. Just a quiet, heartbroken burial. Isaiah's casket was lowered in silence. Monica stepped forward, placed her hand gently on the polished wood, leaned down and whispered something no one else could hear, something only a mother and son would understand. Then she turned and walked away. Reporters were lined up outside the gate, cameras raised, microphones outstretched, but Monica didn't stop. She didn't acknowledge them. The military doesn't teach you how to grieve in public. It teaches you how to endure, to move forward when it burns, to walk through pain like it's terrain, even when your heart feels like it's made of glass. But silence doesn't last forever. By 3 p.m., General Monica Trigg's name was trending in every major city across the country. The hashtags flooded every platform. Justice for General Triggs. She served honor her. Gunpoint at a grave. Clips from the funeral were everywhere. One in particular, filmed by a teenage boy from across the parking lot, captured the entire moment in shaky but crystal clear detail. Monica's hands in the air, the gun pointed inches from her chest, a voice shouting, "I said get on the ground." There was no room for interpretation, no spin. And people didn't want spin, they wanted answers. The first public statement came from the Arlington Police Department, just a few lines posted to a blank white background on their social media page. "We are aware of an incident involving one of our officers at Arlington National Cemetery. An internal investigation is currently underway. The officer in question has been placed on administrative leave pending review." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of who Monica was. No mention of a weapon being aimed at the face of a grieving mother in full uniform. And just like that, it backfired. The moment Arlington PD posted their bland, sterile statement, calling the entire event an incident, it was as if they'd poured gasoline on a fire, and it ignited fast. Within minutes, prominent figures across the country were tearing into the department's response. Senator Lyle Bowers tweeted, "A 4-star general attending her son's funeral in full uniform had a weapon pulled on her, and you call that an incident? That's not just disrespectful, that's a disgrace." Retired General Teresa Randall, one of Monica's closest peers, appeared live on CNN that evening. Her voice cracked mid-sentence as she tried to steady herself. "I trained with Monica. We deployed twice together. She's the reason I stayed in the service. And now I have to sit here and explain to the American public that a woman who gave her life to this country was treated like a criminal in front of her son's casket. This wasn't a mistake. This was a reflection of something deeper." By nightfall, people began gathering outside the Arlington PD headquarters, not with chants or protests, but in silence. Uniforms, medals, folded arms. Some held signs, each with just one message. She served, he pulled a gun. But inside her sister's home in Prince George's County, Monica Triggs remained quiet. She hadn't spoken to any press. She didn't issue a statement. She stayed behind drawn curtains, away from the microphones and flashing lights. That didn't stop people from showing up. Supporters left banners on her fence, candles, letters, dozens, then hundreds. handwritten notes from every corner of the country. One envelope came from Kansas, from another Gold Star mother. I buried my son too. I can't imagine being made to feel like a threat on that day. I'm so sorry the uniform didn't protect you the way it was supposed to. Vivian, Monica's sister, began bringing the letters inside, first in a small box, then two. By the third day, they'd run out of space. Delroy stayed close. He didn't say much, just made sure Monica ate, made sure she rested, even when sleep wouldn't come. And then, on the fourth day, Monica finally spoke. Not to a journalist, not on a podium, but to a private gathering of military families at a quiet meeting in D.C. No cameras, no statements. But someone recorded it anyway. Monica stood in the center of the room in civilian clothes, her voice low but steady. I didn't cry when he died. I didn't cry when I got the call from the Pentagon. I didn't cry at the airport when they handed me his remains. But I cried when that officer aimed a gun at me. Not because I feared for my life, but because I realized the uniform I gave everything to still couldn't protect me from being seen as a threat. That moment, those words, hit harder than any press conference. It was real, honest, human, and the fire that clip lit, no city could contain it. Civil rights attorneys began demanding action. The Department of Justice launched a formal federal investigation. The governor of Maryland issued a public statement, calling the incident a grotesque betrayal of public service and human decency. And Officer Brent Delaney? Still silent. His union refused to comment. His lawyer gave brief interviews, but the public had moved past patience, and the courtroom was about to become the nation's front row seat. 6 months after the funeral, Courtroom 6B at the U.S. District Court in Alexandria was packed beyond capacity. Lines had formed before sunrise. Reporters, activists, retired generals, veterans in full-dress uniforms filled the benches, and near the front, quietly seated, the Triggs family. Monica wore simple civilian clothes. No stars, no ribbons, just Monica. Then Delaney entered. A gray suit, no tie, no badge, no apology, just the weight of the country pressing down on him, and somehow he still didn't look sorry. His lawyer, Mark Holstead, launched into familiar rhetoric. My client was acting in the line of duty. He perceived a threat and responded appropriately. There was no intent to cause harm. But the jury wasn't just listening, they were watching. The courtroom dimmed, the screen flickered on, and the raw footage played. The wind, the shuffle of heels on pavement, Delaney's voice. Put your hands where I can see them. The tension in the room was unbearable. Some jurors wiped away tears. Others looked down. There she was, Monica Triggs, calm, unarmed, standing with hands raised, while a gun was aimed inches from her chest. The lights came back on. No one spoke. Then the witnesses took the stand. First, Lieutenant Serena Keogh, the officer who intervened. He refused to listen, she said clearly. Even after I identified her as General Triggs. He was locked in, aggressive. I had to physically knock the weapon out of his hands. Delaney's attorney tried to twist the story. So you escalated by laying hands on a fellow officer? Keogh didn't blink. I stopped him from shooting an unarmed, grieving mother. Call it whatever you want. Next was Delroy Hunt. He took the stand slowly, steady. He didn't need a microphone. His voice carried through the courtroom like a drumbeat. I've seen enemy fire. I've watched good men die in chaos, but I've never felt more helpless than in that moment, watching someone point a gun at Monica. And she didn't panic. She didn't scream. She stood there like the soldier she is. And he looked at her like she was nothing. And then the bombshell. Internal affairs records. The prosecutor revealed what had been hidden for years. Brent Delaney had 9 previous complaints for excessive force, multiple instances of profiling, 2 incidents involving the use of a firearm, all swept under the rug. And now, for the first time, nothing was being swept, because this wasn't just a trial. This was America watching itself in the mirror. Out of the 9 complaints on Officer Brent Delaney's record, 3 had been dismissed. 6 were ruled inconclusive, but one, just one, was nearly identical. A Black Army Reserve captain in El Paso, pulled over while in uniform, forced out of his car, held at gunpoint. No arrest, no charges, just a quiet label on the report. Miscommunication. And that's when the courtroom shifted. Because this wasn't an isolated error. It was a pattern. The prosecution didn't shout. They didn't need to. They simply placed a photo of Staff Sergeant Isaiah Triggs on the screen, smiling, in uniform, bronze star glinting on his chest. General Triggs came to bury her only child, the prosecutor said. She had every reason to expect honor, respect, dignity. Instead, she faced what no mother, no officer, no human being should ever face, a weapon aimed at her heart, not because of what she did, but because of what he saw when he looked at her. People cried openly in the gallery. Veterans wiped their eyes. Parents held their breath. Monica didn't cry. She sat still, hands folded tightly in her lap, calm. And then it was her turn to speak. She didn't come to the stand with anger. She didn't come to shame. She came to tell the truth. I didn't come here for revenge, she said quietly. I came for accountability. I don't want to see another soldier's mother kneel in fear. I don't want to see another officer walk away from seeing danger where there is none. She paused, then locked eyes with Brent Delaney. I'm not a symbol. I'm a mother, and my son never got the funeral he deserved because of you. And for the first time since the trial began, Delaney looked down. No words, just silence. Maybe for a moment he finally felt it. The jury deliberated for just under 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Violation of civil rights under color of law. Abuse of authority. The judge didn't hesitate. Brent Delaney, he said, you are hereby sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. There was no applause. Just stillness. Heavy, sharp. Then the judge turned to Monica. I hope this courtroom sends a message, not just to law enforcement, but to the country. But for Monica, the real message wasn't in the gavel. It was in what she said next. Outside the courthouse, reporters flooded the steps. Microphones swarmed like bees. Questions flew rapid fire. General Triggs, how do you feel about the sentence? Do you believe justice was served? Will you file suit against the department? Monica didn't answer. Not at first. She stood still. The cool air wrapped around her. Gray clouds hovered overhead, just like the morning her son was buried. Just like the moment everything changed. Vivian stood beside her. Delroy, too. Finally, Monica stepped forward. I didn't come here for revenge, she said calmly. I came here so no one would forget what happened. When a mother in uniform was treated like a threat for grieving her son. The crowd quieted. Reporters lowered their hands. Isaiah died believing in this country, believing in service, in sacrifice. What happened at his funeral was not just a mistake, it was a failure. A failure of training, a failure of judgment, a failure of heart. She took a slow breath, steadied herself. Let me be clear. This is not about one officer. This is about the system that allowed him to keep a badge after 9 complaints. This is about the silence that follows injustice. Once the cameras turn off, then she looked directly at them, at all of us. You don't have to wear a uniform to deserve respect. You don't have to bury a child to deserve peace. But if I, with my rank, my medals, my record, can be seen as a threat at my own son's funeral, then what happens to everyone else who doesn't have a uniform to shield them? She paused. This isn't just my story. This is America's mirror, and it's time we stop pretending we don't recognize the reflection. That clip was played everywhere, on every major network, in classrooms, in hearings on national police reform. It became a defining moment, a turning point. But Monica didn't care about the spotlight. The following Monday, before the cemetery gates opened to the public, she returned to Isaiah's grave, alone. She brought one folding chair and one sunflower, his favorite. She sat for nearly an hour. No speeches, no words, just the wind, the rustle of grass, the silence of a future lost. Before she left, she knelt beside the grave, pressed her palm gently against the cold stone, and whispered, just like she had 6 months before, I did what I had to do. Then she stood up, not because she was healed, not because she felt whole, but because that's what strength really looks like. When the world is still watching, when the pain is still fresh, when justice doesn't bring back what you lost, but helps make sure someone else doesn't lose it next. And if this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Have the conversation. Ask the hard questions. Speak up when you see something wrong, especially when no one else does, because silence protects injustice. But truth? Truth demands to be heard.